Welcome to the October 27th, 2020 meeting of the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust. Before I call the meeting formally to order, I'd like Craig Freeman to make a few remarks about some of the mechanics that we'll be using in the conduct of this meeting. So Craig, if you would please, sir.
Sure. So trustees, secretary, municipal council, please remain unmuted during the meeting. Other participants and staff are to remain on mute until recognized by the chairman or the manager. If you're calling into the meeting, mute and unmute using your phone, on your phone using *6. If the video conference is disconnected at any time during the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the connection is restored. If communication is able to be restored within 15 minutes, and if communications cannot be restored, the meeting will reconvene on October 27th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Anyone wishing to speak about an item or to be included in the citizens to be heard portion at the end of the meeting should call 405-297-2245 or text 405-219-7987, or you can email cityclerk@okc.gov. Please submit your request now to avoid receipt of your request after the item has been considered. The agenda and attachments are available online at okc.gov.
I'm missing the agenda. It's right here. Isn't that it? Yeah.
Thank you, Craig. I'm having a little problem finding some paperwork here in the car, so bear with me for just a minute. Joanna, have you got a meeting to order? Okay. Next up is to formally call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is to approve the minutes of the September 28th, 2020 Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, there's been a motion and a second. So how do you vote?
I vote to approve also.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, we will also need Trustee Roth to voice vote. I don't show him logged into PrimeGov.
Thank you. I voted in the affirmative.
Motion passes.
Thank you all very much. Next on the agenda is to ratify the OCEDT claims.
It was moved by Trustee Stone, seconded by Hooper.
I move to approve also.
I vote aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Next up is a resolution to talk about a sole source agreement between Economic Development Services provided by Progress OKC and marketing services by Kiva. Craig, if you would please, sir.
Sure. I'm going to turn it over to Joanna McSpadden and let her introduce our speakers that will introduce this project and what the goals of the project will be and the request from OSED for support for the project. Joanna?
I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the funding associated with this item, and then we'll have JD Baker with the Mayor's Office, Evan Fay with the Chamber, and Mariana Adams with Progress OKC are going to do a presentation with a slideshow to kind of fill you in on exactly what Kiva is. So very briefly, Kiva is kind of like a micro lending crowdfunding program. And it's an established software and platform that we would be entering into an agreement with. The cost that you have on the resolution today is associated with 1 year's worth of support for this program. And to break down that cost, we have $100,000 as what would be used as a revolving loan fund out of the trust. We have $60,000 that's used for management services for the program. This is cost of a position or a person to help manage the loan program and the platform, the software that's associated with the Kiva program. We have $7,500 for marketing services associated with the program so that we can get the word out and have people logging in to the platform to participate. And then the last $1,000 will actually be combined with a $24,000 grant for a total of $25,000. That's the cost of the first year subscription. Progress OKC has applied for a grant through CDBG for $24,000, which covers just about that full subscription service. So that's the breakdown of the $168,500 that you see for the project. And there's two other things I want to know. One thing is this funding is not from GOLT or TIF. This is actually kind of what we call our general fund for economic development. And so it's a little bit less restrictive. And the second thing that I want to point out is that this is not directly linked to any of the small business programs that we've been putting forward through the CARES Act. This would be something that would go on into the future after CARES, and hopefully we have a vaccination soon and all of that. So this is something that would continue further. And then I'll hand it over now to Mariana and the other two to go through the slideshow.
Thank you. Mariana?
Good afternoon, members and staff. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you about Kiva US, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. As Joanna pointed out, it is a crowdfunding platform which allows small businesses and aspiring entrepreneurs access to critical funding so that they can support their communities through job creation, through essential amenities and services. I'm going to actually turn it over to Evan Fay so he can provide a little bit of context and background on how we have arrived here. And then I will discuss how the program works. And JD will finish off on how the mayor's office has bought into this and our ask of you all today. Evan?
Thank you, Mariana. I believe we have a slideshow if we're able to view that. I'm not sure, Lacey, do you need me to share my screen? Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. Well, first, thank you all for just the opportunity to put this exciting opportunity in front of you. As Mariana said, I'm Evan Fay. I work for the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber as a project manager, and we're also joined by JD from the mayor's office. If you don't mind going to the next slide, perfect. So wanted to give a brief background about kind of how we got here to build a relationship with Kiva and think about how to solve the issue of capital access for small businesses across the city. So the National League of Cities approached me about 6 months ago to determine if Oklahoma City would like to participate in a prestigious cohort of cities that are wishing to tackle equitable economic development through a program that is called their City Innovation Ecosystems Program. It's the second year that this program has been active, and we're joined by cities such as New Orleans, Kansas City, Fresno, California, and others. And we were given a menu of potential kind of social issues to tackle in creating an environment for equitable economic development. And in speaking with the mayor's office and the Alliance for Economic Development and others on the city staff, we landed on a micro lending platform for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And so once our 1 year program with the National League of Cities began, we were paired up with Kiva as our technical assistance provider to facilitate the micro lending platform. Next slide, please. So Kiva is an international nonprofit that's been around for about 15 years. They've facilitated over $1 billion of crowdsourced and traditionally sourced lending for micro enterprises and entrepreneurs. And they opened up their US operations in 2013 and have been responsible for about $40 million of crowdfunded lending to primarily minority-owned businesses, first-generation entrepreneurs, and those without access to traditional sources of capital. As you'll see here, Kiva loans charge 0 interest no fees, and are kind of intended to be the first step of the capital ladder for many businesses that otherwise would not qualify for SBA lending, for bank loans, or other personal lines of credit. Kiva's mission is to increase access to capital for small businesses that just may not otherwise be able to be served by these entities. So here is a snapshot of Kiva's webpage. And so this is what an entrepreneur's crowdfunding profile looks like. So this is Mason. He's in Los Angeles, and any of us on this call could lend as little as $25 towards Mason's video production business. And this is really kind of the power of Kiva in a snapshot. So you'll see that there's 62 lenders that have lent to Mason's business so far. And this is a match that is made with the Kiva Loan Fund. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But loans are available for about 60 days on the platform. Borrowers have 60 days to complete their loan, and then the capital is deployed. They have about 3 years to repay the loan, and it kind of starts the, it provides just a startup capital for a lot of these small businesses. So a variety of businesses, from Main Street retail businesses to even startups and some small, services and goods-based businesses can qualify for these loans. Next slide, please. So Kiva is made possible not only by people like you and I who can lend, but by community banks, economic development organizations, municipal governments, and a variety of different financial backers. As I mentioned earlier, there's about 1.8 million active lenders, and some statistics about the businesses that are being lent to. About 68% are women, 71% are minorities, 66% are classified as low to moderate income borrowers, and about 60% either have a credit score below 650 or don't know their credit score. And so this is really one of the only solutions that we've seen that provides access to capital for businesses that need it the most. We feel that this is timely, especially amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, as we've seen minority, women-owned businesses disproportionately closing down without access to capital that they need to weather the storm. And this allows access for citizens in Oklahoma City to be part of the lending process, for local banks and financial institutions, and for really the entire nation. So with that, I will hand it over to Mariana to discuss the specifics of a proposed program in Oklahoma City.
Thank you, Evan. So Kiva is willing to lend where no one else is, recognizing that microlending is expensive and cumbersome, but with their unique model, costs are distributed across the globe, creating critical efficiency. Next slide, please. So Kiva provides access to what they call first rung of the capital ladder for entrepreneurs. And it's the most risky, but given their model and their success of a 97% repayment rate across their markets, they're delivering and filling a gap in so many markets across the United States, and we're excited to bring that here. So in comparison to CDFIs, the average loan size on a Kiva loan is $6,000. For CDFIs, that's typically around $12,000. And CDFIs usually charge interest ranging from 6 to 25%, which makes it really unaffordable for the segment of the population that we're talking about today. Few offer this size, and again, even fewer offer this rate because it is expensive, but it's necessary to fill this critical gap so we can make our communities even more, build their capacity, create that pipeline to capital, and make our city even more competitive. Next slide. So the Kiva Hub serves as a market where Kiva has developed a partnership working with local stakeholders, including economic leaders like yourselves, to make capital more accessible to those most excluded clients. So Joanna had pointed out that there's a $25,000 admin fee or license fee each year, or $65,000 across 3 years. And the trade-off with that is that we are able to receive technical assistance, direct technical assistance that includes their underwriting and their processing, Kiva's underwriting and processing, their training and onboarding on a semi-annual basis where they give us a playbook and help us with marketing materials and really get us acclimated to their tools. Of course, their global lending platform, which Evan shared the impact of that when you're talking about nearly $2 million lenders, which include you, myself, my neighbor. So it's really people for the people. And then impact data. Data is so important so we can make sure that we're on track and really achieving the outcomes that we set forth. So we'll have access 24/7 to their market dashboard and able to generate reports for not only you all, if approved, but other stakeholders too. So Kiva recognizes that every community is unique. So when you think about at the macro level, at the community level, this really creates shared ownership of solving income inequality because it becomes a small piece of everyone's problem rather than an unsolvable challenge given to just governments. We all have stake in an opportunity to participate and contribute. So this really is an empowering your neighbor model where we bring in community stakeholders, where they can be lending to their neighbor, their favorite business. But we also have a trustee network, those that are in the field and understand what it takes to run a successful business. So those would be the individuals or the entities that would give us referrals and also, again, kind of provide those wraparound services to businesses, education, mentorship, et cetera. Then again, the hub would serve sort of like the quarterback, coordinating all the different pieces and walking with the borrower step by step through the process, even after they actually repay their loan, just to make sure that they're successful. And then funders. Our funders are definitely a big part of this. So both philanthropic, government, et cetera, and so forth, so we can have that matching loan program. Next slide. These are the existing hubs across the US here domestically. And again, we're joining a cohort from St. Louis, Waco, New Orleans, Tacoma, Fresno, Memphis, not you name it, but those are some other markets that are taking this on as a result of COVID-19 and just to support their small businesses that give back in so many different ways. Next slide. Here's a case study, Rochester, New York. In 2016, they raised $100,000 to start a Kiva Hub, to launch a loan matching account run by the city that again supports some of their impoverished neighborhoods and underrepresented founders. And as a result, we see that over $400,000 has been lent with an 82% repayment rate, and most of their borrowers, 60% being minorities who didn't have another opportunity to access, again, that critical capital. Next slide. We have Wisconsin, which created, they had a Women's Business Initiative Corporation, or the WWBIC, which launched in 2015. They to date have raised so much money and have lent over $1 million to expand access, again, to underrepresented founders, in this case, women, with a repayment rate of 78% and 63% being minorities. Next slide. And then right up the turnpike, our friends in Tulsa, Lobeck Taylor Family Foundation, took this on as both a trustee, a funder, and a hub, overachievers. But they started this around 3 years ago. And within their first year, they had 42 loans just in the first year. To date, they've had nearly 90 borrowers with 16 new borrowers between April and August of this year. Their repayment rate is near 90%. And again, creating a pipeline and a continuum for those businesses that either had poor credit or not established credit or had been historically denied traditional loans or financing that we're used to. So we've had many conversations with them. They have already provided us some technical assistance and they're doing great things there. And we're so excited to bring that to Oklahoma City. So with that, I will throw it over to JD Baker.
Thank you so much, Mariana. I appreciate it. So what are we asking for here? Basically, as
Evan Mariana has said, this is something that really comes from National League of Cities and from the mayor's office and everything. And so we do really find that to be able to fund this, really kind of get this started off the ground, we need the support of the Economic Development Trust. So that we're asking for $100,000 for the loan fund. So the intended goal is $500,000 in this loan fund, so that we're able to match any fundraised loans dollar for dollar. So if a borrower raises $5,000 from their neighbors and friends, we can match that, so they have their $10,000 loan. And so we're helping to get $500,000 total. So this will be the seed money for that total loan fund. And when you really think about it, if we're matching dollar for dollar, that's $1 million total that will be refueled back into our economy, given back to the lenders, and once again be able to use again for more businesses. So this is really a gift that keeps on giving. But the $61,000 that we'll be able to use for professional services, that includes the capital access manager, so the salary and benefits for that individual to be an employee of Progress OKC, and also additional $1,000 in there that will be added to the $25,000 Kiva fee to supplement some of the deficit from the CDBG funds used towards to cover that fee for the first year, and the $7,500 for marketing. And the reason why marketing is so important is, first and foremost, we got to get borrowers. So we have to get the word out to all these businesses in Oklahoma City, or these entrepreneurs that are trying to take that first step or that next step in our city, so they know about the program. But also that we're making sure our neighbors are aware of this, so that individuals like myself or Jim or Rhonda or Councilman McAtee, that we can hop on this platform, know about it, and hop on it and find these businesses and give $25, $50, $500 to these businesses to help them get started and be able to get to their certain amount that they need for their loan. And so that $7,500 will be really important in marketing, but also telling the story. So even in the long term, telling the story of the impact of these individuals and maybe some of the help and services that they may need, and also making sure that they receive technical assistance, whatever else they need supported beyond just the Kiva program and the loan, providing them the loans. Next slide, please. So what are our next steps? So currently we are finalizing our sources of funding from numerous different sources as well, including the Economic Development Trust, but also some philanthropic sources across the community. Engaging our trustee network. So we're going to work with the Oklahoma City Black Chamber, the Oklahoma City Hispanic Chamber, the South Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, we're also going to be working with different community banks. Another thing that makes this program is important, that this is actually creating a pipeline for those banks. So this is the first step of the capital ladder, the first rung. And so once these businesses continue to grow and expand, they can go on to receive loans from CDFIs and banks and stuff. And so really working with them to be able to start working and creating relationships with these businesses, creating a pipeline, that will be really good for our whole economy as a whole. And then next month, the Hub will participate in the training through the CAM, or Mariana Adams will participate in the training. And then hopefully we'll launch by December, be able to really start the marketing and really try and engage and find those businesses and work with them and those looking to take that first or next step. And we'll also be partnering with community organizations to spread awareness, but also really like trying to find the technical assistance to be able to help these businesses beyond just the lending portion of this program. And then by May, we have made a commitment with the National League of Cities to have 10 fully funded loans by May. We really feel that is a very attainable goal, especially looking at what other cities have done and what Tulsa did in this first year. I believe it was 42 loans within this first year. And they even did 16 loans between April and August of this year because of COVID-19. So we really do feel that that's an attainable goal through the National League of Cities. Next slide. So thank you so much for allowing us to present, and we'll open up the floor for any questions that we may be able to answer for the members of the trust.
Thank you, JD. Craig, do you want to take over?
I don't have anything else to add on that.
I've got
Okay,
a couple of questions.
Let's take questions from the members. Go ahead.
This is Todd. I just have a couple of questions. Credit reporting, is Kiva or Progress OKC going to do the credit reporting on this? I mean, I just see that as a huge benefit for somebody.
Kiva will facilitate the credit reporting, and so it's like, you know, paying your utility bills on time. These borrowers, when they're repaying the loan over up to 3 years, it'll positively impact their credit. And as part of the kind of social forgiveness of the Kiva platform, in the event that there is a default, it is not reported on borrower's credit, so it only positively affects what they're building.
Good. And is this commercial paper or personal notes?
These are personal notes.
And the trustees, so is that a mentorship program?
So it certainly can be. That is one of the, to me, kind of the most unique pieces of the Kiva platform. So, you know, let's say, Councilperson Stone, you're a trustee. So if you kind of put your stamp of approval on borrowers over time and you sign on as the trustee, that kind of means a little bit more to the Kiva community if your name is behind that and you have endorsed borrowers that repeatedly repay their loans in full. And so while it's not necessary for trustees to endorse borrowers for them to get a loan, it does help with the size of the loan over time that they're able to receive. And it kind of adds an extra step of validity that individual is known in the community, that you've kind of had eyes on their business model, and that they'll be maybe more apt to repay their loan on time or early and in full. We are working with the Small Business Development Centers of Oklahoma to provide some back-end technical assistance with Kiva borrowers. And we plan to build that partnership in, as well as other mentor-driven and business planning partnerships throughout the city with existing, you know, kind of technical assistance providers to ensure that all the needs of the businesses are met instead of, you know, exclusively looking at capital. Really, you know, the goal is for these businesses to not just sustain, but to grow and scale and employ and create wealth for their founding group and for their employees.
To add to Todd's question, I mean, the first rung on the ladder is very critical, but the sustainability and having mentorship and guidance, that is where a lot of companies go. And so having that help and connections are very critical to the success. And we want to be the most effective and highest performing of all the Kiva hubs. So no pressure, JD, Mariana, Evan, but you have your objectives to fill.
We accept.
And
I love it.
yes. And one thing that is also, I think, really great on the long term about this program and just the economic development for these small business owners, especially the market that we probably will be serving, women and minority-owned businesses, is we've just pledged almost a year ago, the citizens of the city, $15 million towards the Henrietta B. Foster Center for Northeast Small Business Development. So this is basically creating also a pipeline for that program as well, so that those businesses, and so, you know, we don't know when that will be built and everything. We'll leave that for the Maps Work Committee to decide. But I definitely see this as a pipeline of businesses that we can continue to expand our entrepreneurs. They'll have users and people who will utilize those services in those programs.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the
Larry, I've got one more. I'm sorry. Progress OKC. Can we talk a little bit more? I don't know if anyone's on the call that's representing Progress OKC, but I was wanted to hear a little bit more about what they thought their role was in this.
Absolutely. So Progress OKC, our mission is to strengthen the social and economic fabric of underserved communities. And we've traditionally done that through affordable housing and some workforce initiatives. and found within the communities that we were serving that there were so many business owners that were needing, as you all have pointed out, mentorship, technical assistance, or additional capital to scale, to grow, and in this environment to sustain. And so we have been in existence for 5 years, or no, more than that, actually, 6 years. Our board leadership president is Kathy O'Connor, and then our board chair is Chris Turner. And one of the latest initiatives that we were part of was the Minority Enterprise Development Week, where we were actually able to engage over 80 minority businesses, some of which were also women-owned or veteran-owned, around this very topic on how to sustain and grow and utilize the existing resources that we have in the city to better connect them with the chambers and with other resources. But again, capital was one of the things that we just weren't able to offer at that time. So we're excited to bring that in the market through Kiva, which is reputable at a global level, has been recognized by Time Magazine and The Economist and so many different sources. We're excited to bring that here. And we will serve as the hub. So we will house the capital access manager, go through the training and walk, from start to finish with the buyers through the process to create that ease.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, just an additional question.
Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you for the initiative. I've recently been spending a lot of time reading about the deaggregation of the economy. People have lost their jobs. What do they do, right? The whole idea, if you can't find a job, create a job. So I love that this is a ladder up, that first step as you described it. So thank you for the city's willingness to serve. I guess my question for the three that have helped present it, as you've looked around the country, beyond the case studies you provided, what are a couple of the most common attributes that you think determine the success of an initiative like that we should make sure exists for our program?
I would start, something that I thought was really interesting out of Tulsa, that's the one group that we had the most conversations with outside of Kiva US, was again to what JD had pointed out, the relationship that they had with community banks, and them making a point that it's not a competition, that we can actually create a pipeline for borrowers that once they need 50,000 or maybe even more, that they establish that relationship with you all through us. And so I thought that was really interesting how they are working with the Tulsa Economic Development group out there, which is a CDFI, and other banks on really making this a holistic model with the banking institutions out there and the community banks out there. JD, do you have anything to add?
I think it was another thing was like some of the trustees were also in Tulsa were different partners, including churches. Churches was actually played a dynamic role in Kiva Tulsa's success. But I think one thing as well is, any city can create a hub, have a hub in their city. But one thing, this is also being, we're kind of being escorted in this with the National League of Cities. So National League of Cities has also given us a lot of connections and resources. So we have monthly calls with different folks and stuff. So I've even connected with the Director of Community Wealth Building of Rochester, which that office is a branch of the mayor's office, and they basically launched the Kiva program in Rochester, which we saw on our slide. So we also have different, basically a network of folks that we can also rely on and utilizing their network of resources and stuff. And so that individual gave me a plethora of stuff, of resources. I know I passed it on to Mariana just a few weeks ago.
Thank you all.
Any other questions or comments from the trustees? Seeing none, Francis, if you would call the roll for approval.
Yes, it's been moved by trustee Pickens, seconded by trustee Stone. How do you vote, trustee Roth?
I vote aye.
Chairman McAtee?
Votes aye.
Thank you. Motion
Thank you.
passes unanimously.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next item. Craig, if you would, the obligation from the general obligation tax bonds dealing with the purchase of some property.
So this is a request. There's a joint resolution for allocation of GOLP funds of $13 million. And it's a request to allocate these funds to be transferred to the Oklahoma Industries Authority for the purpose of acquiring property on the east part of the city, out on I-240 between Eastern and South Bryant. And the goal is to have this developable land. As properties are developed, the idea would be that these funds would come back to the Economic Development Trust. But I'm going to let Jeff Seymour with the Chamber of Commerce is on, and I'll let him kind of go through the details of what the plan is here.
Certainly. Thank you, Craig. Lacey, do I have the ability to share my screen, or do I just need to keep it to verbal comments? Okay, start my video. Okay, so to tie into Craig's comments, what we're looking at here, and I can share a presentation if I'm able.
Lacey, you need to give him permission, make him co-host.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Francis.
So what we're looking at is an acquisition through a partnership between the Industries Authority and the Trust of 577 acres located at the intersection of I-240 and Eastern, between I-240 Eastern and I-240 and Bryant. Property is currently owned by the Commission of Land Office and has been held by the state basically in perpetuity since the creation. As you can tell, immediately adjacent to the I-240 corridor and also immediately adjacent to the BNSF Oklahoma City Logistics Center, which is the BNSF rail yard that they've also been expanding for rail capacities to bring product into and out of Oklahoma City. Conversation around the need for this property has been a long time in the making. As many of you know, we try to figure out the role of public process in land development for many years, and try to figure out how to influence the development of more acreage to help us have more inventory for industrial and commercial projects. Just a couple quick slides that kind of show some of the need. We did an inventory assessment at the end of 2019 to understand kind of what the current pipeline of projects look like for both industrial projects from both the building and the land side. Overall, and this is again at the end of 2019, kind of right before COVID hit, 51% of our industrial projects we had in our pipeline were looking for buildings of 100,000 square foot or larger, and 23% were looking at buildings 250,000 square feet or larger. On the land side, 68% of those users were looking at properties 20 acres or larger, and almost half were looking at sites 50 acres or larger. The bad news is there's really not that much property to meet those needs available in the marketplace. To complement the current pipeline, we also took a hard look at projects that we had lost in the last 5 years to understand where the gaps currently existed in our land and building inventory. So I think this middle bullet is the most acute, where we, on average, for projects we have lost, average size of the user was a little over 50 acres and a little less than 73 acres. And of projects that we have lost, 23 specifically stated that lack of land and building sites in the market were the major contributor to their reasoning for not locating in the market. So asked for some specific examples. We had 3 examples of recent projects that really wanted to be in Oklahoma City that couldn't be. The first is a project we worked actually during COVID. Project Augustus, it's a food manufacturing project that was looking at placing 135 new jobs, about $40 million of capital in the market, but struggled to find a land and building site that met their needs, have chosen to pursue other markets. Milo's Iced Tea was a project that looked hard at Oklahoma City and in Tulsa. Eventually, because of a building site that they could find in Tulsa versus Oklahoma City, chose to put 110 new jobs and $60 million in capital investment in Owasso instead of here. And then Project Rodeo, which was a project that was looking at 100-acre sites, with 50 contiguous acres. They came to us in the fall of 2018, worked really hard on a site at 29th and Council, couldn't make it work and ended up going to a different market. So you can just kind of see overall, we've just struggled to put together large contiguous acres of property that could be developed over a long period of time and give us some long-standing inventory. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve with this property. So the process would be for us would be allocation of $13 million that the OIA would use to acquire the property through a land swap with the CLO. From there, the OIA would issue a master developer RFP to bring in a private third party to help market and draw attraction or draw investment from the outside market to the site. And then that RFP would be approved by the trust, as with subsequent land deals. The major benefit of this particular structure would also be that as property was sold or leased by the OIA in agreement with the trust, that the benefits, the financial benefits of those purchases or leases would flow back to the trust to repatriate the dollars used in this initial expense to purchase the property. So I don't know, Craig or Wiley, if you want to add to those comments, but we tried to really think through how the trust would get their money back on this and make sure that, you know, this was used as an economic development tool in the master tool belt.
Yeah, I think the questions you run into with this is allocating such a large portion of our gold funds to one project. And ultimately, it's going to be more than one project is what it's intended to be. But with that goal that the dollars generally will come back into the Economic Development Trust. The exception might be where, sometimes as a part of an economic development deal, there may be some discount on the property. So it's not a guarantee that we get all the money back, but our goal would be that through the transactions to get these businesses onto these properties, that the funding would come back into the Economic Development Trust. Ultimately, it would be over a period of time. So it does tie up some of those funds for a period of time, but I know there's some active projects where there's potential for businesses to go out into these areas. So that's what the recommendation is coming back to the council. I don't know if to the trust. I don't know if Wiley has anything else to add on that.
I might add that it's possible that this could become a TIF location because it's undeveloped and underutilized property. So it may meet the requirements to create a TIF district, which would help the economic development.
Any further comments or questions from the trustees?
This is Rhonda. I do have a question. I know nothing is normal right now, but what are we talking about in potential development years? Is it a short term or is it a 10-year, 20-year? What do we think in a normal scenario, if you will?
I think the good news is we already have outside developers that are really interested in a partnership with us to develop portions of this site. Honestly, I would say I leave this as more of a medium-term development, partially because we want to remain flexible with our overall development needs moving forward and try to retain at least probably a couple hundred acres of this site to give some flexibility for some of these larger projects we haven't been able to land in the city. But I don't know, Craig, your thoughts. I would say medium term.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And I think, it's one of those, just like you said, Rhonda, the market of everything is different right now. It's hard to say, but I think the idea would be that probably that shorter term for some of this and a little bit longer term on the larger portion, trying to hold a larger section so that if we did have an opportunity to use that. So I think some of this would come back fairly soon would be the anticipation, but there would be a portion of it that it'd take some time to develop.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll take a motion for the joint resolution between the city and the Economic Development Trust.
Trustee Stone moved and Trustee Hooper seconded the motion. Trustee Roth, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee McAtee?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Great presentation, guys and gals. All right, let's move forward. Amendment number 1 to the Economic Development Agreement dealing with the new grocery store at Lincoln and 50th, excuse me. Oh,
Yep.
36.
You're right, it's at Lincoln and
Okay.
36th. This item is just an amendment to the Economic Development Agreement to add a party that's related to the new markets tax credits. And I'll let Wiley Williams just kind of give us a rundown on the need for this amendment.
This is adding an additional party to the Homeland project, which is required by the new markets tax credit structure. And it actually, I see it as a benefit because it gives us another party to work with as we go through the process.
Thank you, Wiley. Questions from other trustees? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the joint resolution?
Moved by
amendment.
Stone, seconded by Hooper. Roth,
Aye.
McAtee,
Aye.
motion approved unanimously.
Thank you, Francis. Next up is item D, a joint resolution between Oklahoma City and the Trust and the Myriad Gardens.
Yes, this item is back in July, the trust approved an agreement with Myriad Gardens Foundation for the operations of Myriad Gardens. And this is an amendment to that agreement for some facility maintenance costs that are tied into the contract. I'm going to let Doug Dowler, Assistant Finance Director, give us a summary of the proposed projects with this maintenance fund.
Yes, thank you, Craig. We have 5 projects that the Myriad Gardens is asking for capital maintenance support on. Last year was the first year that we incorporated that into the agreement with them between OSED and the Myriad Gardens Foundation. In the past, the city has provided these sorts of maintenance items, but these are a little bit smaller than we've done in the past. We're still continuing to provide maintenance for significant improvements, such as we're replacing some of their air handling units each year. And so we're still maintaining that. But these projects, pardon me, are ones that are a little bit smaller, and we felt it was a little simpler for them to handle those, and we would do those on a reimbursement basis. So again, there's 5 projects, closed water loop system, and then also the water to the air handling units, the reverse osmosis and fog equipment at the Thunder Fountain, the surface, that aggregate surface that's kind of a specialized surface there with underneath the Thunder Fountain, and then the Children's Garden Play resurfacing replacements. So we're doing this with money that came from the general fund in the current year, as well as some leftover from last year that was part of this OSED agreement. $26,949 that was left over that was not used last year will be rolled into this current year's contract. Be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the joint resolution.
Trustee Pickens moved and Hooper seconded. Roth,
Aye.
McAtee,
Aye. Thank you
motion
all.
passes.
Next on our agenda, the Oklahoma City Economic Development Foundation Business Retention Expansion Presentation.
Yes, we have Lee Copeland with us today with the Chamber of Commerce to make a presentation on this program.
Mr. Copeland, if you could unmute.
There we go. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to visit with you all today. I joined the Chamber a year ago in the first week of November, and what a year it has been. It's a pleasure to bring to you kind of a description of our activity over the last fiscal year. And so I've entitled this presentation From Reactivity to Opportunity, to really kind of walk us through really what is a tale of 2 years. And so if you'll advance to the next slide, please. Really, 2019, 2020 really was 2 realities. the graphic that you have in front of you sort of illustrates the drastic change in terms of the challenge that lay ahead of us. So when we were at the beginning of the last fiscal year, we were really talking about how do we meet demand curves in terms of talent with a plethora of unfilled jobs and sort of figuring out how to make those connections. And so really within this year, as you can see there in April of 2020, just the massive drop in employment really sort of illustrates the challenge that we now face, which we've gone from thinking about demand curves to focusing on flattening the curve in terms of a pandemic. So really it's just how do we respond? And so we've made some pivots and some changes in how we do our work, as well as being able to think differently about how we move forward. So next slide, please. So we really made a pretty massive shift in our methodology, really to more of a high response, high touch volume sort of approach to reaching out to our regional employers. And so overall this year, we engaged 435 different companies. 56 of those were leading employers, so our largest employers, where we did deeper dives in terms of their talent needs, the challenges that they're facing in acquiring or recruiting talent, and ultimately in retaining them. And over the course of the year, happy to say that we had over 1,500 individual engagements with these companies in our Oklahoma City region. So really reaching out, asking them what's going on, what's happening behind the walls, what are you seeing, what pain points are you experiencing, whether that's in terms of thinking about your future, whether it's about talent, et cetera. And so certainly in this year, the pandemic, we got lots of great feedback. One of the things I would like to point out from that number of engagements, that nearly 40% of that total number of engagements, we ramped up and executed between mid-March and the end of June. So a lot of heavy lifting was done by our team during that period of time. This next slide sort of represents a bit more of that methodology. So during that time, we were looking for opportunities to connect businesses with either answers to the questions they had or resources that they were needing to resolve critical issues at the time. So over the course of this last fiscal year, our team was able to assist 170 companies with needs that they had, in some cases multiple needs, whether that was a connection when manufacturers were pivoting to PPE and needed maybe a critical piece in the supply chain, we were able to make some of those connections. Some of it was connecting employers that were laying off talent to employers that we knew were hiring. And so we've been able to make a variety of those assists, just standing in the gap and making those connections on behalf of the chamber between employers and information or resources that they needed. We also were able to support the aviation and aerospace industry by engaging 25 different companies with 58 different engagements. And so this is a variety of check-ins and touch bases. Some of them were really deep dives being done about talent needs and those kinds of things. But we're able to execute that, and I'm super proud of that effort. Also, just between the period of mid-March to the end of June, we had really significant conversations with 277 primary employers. So of that total number of companies engaged, about 277 of our premier employers really got multiple touches with really deeper conversations to be able to know what they're seeing and hearing and feeling to be able to help us know how to move forward. So next slide, please. So our methodology really is important to note here that the 628 number represents those number of individual interactions that were really focused with Oklahoma City businesses on specifically how they were navigating the pandemic. Our team was able to disseminate at periods of time vital information, whether it was on connecting companies that were needing PPE, companies that we helped vet for the PPE directory for the state to be able to provide those resources to the city. Lots of questions and funneling resources on SBA loans and all of the assistance that the city has been able to provide, as well as other just timely asks for information or clarification from our business owners. Being able to loop them into that information became just a super important function of our team. And ultimately what we were doing was actively listening to input from employers, HR professionals, as well as having conversations with educational providers, workforce providers, really sort of trying to take the temperature of what was happening economically on our region, as well as from employers and so forth. And so super proud of those efforts and those engagements that our team was able to put together. In terms of the regional response, we did see a lot of reactivity. The truth is that there were a lot of local manufacturers that were able to keep busy or at least made pivots in what they were doing. And so some of them meant that they shifted what they were doing in producing prior to COVID to producing PPE or adding that as an additional line in what they were doing. Some of them had to make changes in terms of how they were producing and when they were producing, but were able to, for the most part, stay busy during that time. It did shine a light on the needs for technology and sort of the opportunity for improvement in that in terms of automation or some of those things in the future. But also there is a reticence as they begin to think about the future, the ability to bid on future work based on the ongoing disruption in terms of supply chain and those kinds of things. The uncertainty about timeline on being able to bid future work continues to exist. Obviously, many employers had to navigate layoffs and downsizing. And so we worked directly with some of those companies as we saw those warn notices or notices of large layoffs. When possible, we tried to figure out which companies were offering or hiring maybe in a similar talent profile. And so we were able to make some connections there, even though that there was a significant number of companies that were experiencing those layoffs. A quote that I've included here for you came from someone here in Oklahoma City who said, you know, we went from not being able to hire enough people fast enough to not being able to lay people off fast enough. And so within one fiscal year, to see that shift was really a dramatic thing for many of our employers. One of the things that was interesting, though, was that many employers had to react to their employees' needs. And so there was a noticeable uptick in questions around resourcing regarding employee well-being. Lots of companies asking for resources or strategies to support the physical or mental health of their employees, to ideas on what other companies are doing to support employee engagement, particularly for those that shifted to a work from home model. And so that was an interesting theme that emerged for us. As well as many employers simply just hit pause when it came to hiring and onboarding. A lot of companies, for a variety of reasons and ongoing uncertainty, have just said we need to put our plans possibly on hold, whether that's for short-term or long-term remains to be seen in many cases. But certainly with the shift in terms of how many people are employed versus unemployed now, many companies are somewhat waiting and reticent to continue to onboard. The one exception would be companies that are continuing to onboard. They have shifted to primarily backfilling critical positions that are necessary, but they're being very cautious as they kind of move forward. One of the things that we did notice is that many employers deployed new technology and strategies. There were many companies that did not have permanent work from home arrangements or platforms that out of necessity were able to successfully execute that transition very quickly. And many of them have indicated that they will likely continue to incorporate some of that platform and those change strategies going forward. And so there's some interesting implications for that, certainly. We've seen some companies that were instituting new schedules, really sort of disrupting their traditional work structures and models, and even spacing in terms of how they think about physical spacing at the work site. So there will be some interesting disruptions coming out of all of this. The truth is that there is still, though, a fair amount of disruption. We're really off the map, so to speak, in terms of how to move forward. The uncertainty around employees that have school-age children and the kind of ongoing changes in terms of education schedules and platforms really has caused a lot of companies to have kind of a weekly sort of renegotiation of where they are with some of their employees. And so I think one of the interesting things, and I'll allude to this later, is the opportunity to begin to reimagine some opportunities for innovation coming out of all of these reactions that we've had to make. So next slide, please. And as I alluded to, really the big takeaway, and this is no surprise, is the overall general sense of uncertainty that many of our employers feel. The pandemic continues to disrupt operations and in many cases, future planning. Many companies seem to have maybe sort of multiple versions of the future plan based on a variety of variables. And so some things just remain to be seen about whether they will continue to follow through with prior plans for expansion, hiring, et cetera. And as I mentioned, remote learning and remote working continue to create some interesting variables for our employers. And many employers are simply just proceeding with caution. So that's uncertain timeframes for large-scale plans for expansion. Again, as I mentioned, primarily backfilling critical positions is kind of a current trend that we see in talent. Many plans for expansion have been placed on hold, and sort of a lack of clarity around what future headcounts and really modes of working will look like as we continue to navigate the pandemic. And I think just overall a general anxiety and sense of a vulnerability over the emotional well-being of employees. I'll point you to that statistic. The Chamber had a number of responses from partners, probably over 300 respondents in a survey done in mid-April. And at that time, 49% of those companies stated that their greatest fear, their greatest challenge that they were facing for reopening was their employees' fear and anxiety. And I think that continues to hold true, that companies are indicating that there's such a unique and complex mixture of challenges right now facing their employees that while they're certainly concerned about bottom lines and all of those other things, that taking care of their employees and helping them through these really difficult times continues to be of high priority and a high pain point for many of our employers. Next slide, please. But I want to leave on a positive note. From what we have observed over our many interactions this year, we think that there are three sort of opportunities or themes of opportunity for us that I believe to be bright spots for business retention and expansion here in Oklahoma City. The first is, as we talk with so many employers across so many industries, that there really is abundant entry-level talent for many of our employers, with the notable exception of engineers to fulfill some of those MRO responsibilities at Tinker. For the most part, many of our industries are finding abundant entry-level talent. And the good news about that is that they already have a high affinity for Oklahoma City. So the work and the investment that the city has made in terms of positioning Oklahoma City as a great place to live, work, and play is positively impacting many of our regional employers, particularly at the entry-level talent area. And so we feel like that is a positive thing that we need to continue to capitalize on. Secondly, when it comes to mid and upper level talent recruitment, this is where we tend to see more companies are sourcing that talent off region or outside of Oklahoma City. And so the good news, it's a good news, bad news type scenario. The good news is that anytime that those folks are sourcing that mid to upper level talent outside of Oklahoma City and they can convince that the person that they are recruiting to come visit Oklahoma City, that the vast majority of companies indicate that they are able to then make offers and successfully hire that recruit, and that the opportunity for us lies in sort of continuing to overcome any of those preconceived notions about the city that may exist outside of Oklahoma City. Companies indicate when the talent comes and they see what Oklahoma City has to offer, they see the wide range of opportunities for education for their children, for employment for their spouses, and all of those kinds of things, the variety of arts and entertainment and sort of all those enrichment opportunities, that they really have a great opportunity to land that talent. So the challenge for us really is just how do we continue to tell the Oklahoma City story in such a way that we can continue to resource those companies to sell Oklahoma City to that mid to upper level talent. And then lastly, all of this disruption, we believe, is creating some space for innovation, and technology talent development is going to be the key. Really beginning to look at companies thinking about maybe some non-traditional ways to source and develop talent rapidly to meet their emerging needs for technology, for user interface support in terms of software development and those kinds of things. And so increasingly, there are conversations taking place about how can we continue to quickly reskill or upskill existing talent here that's already here regionally to begin to meet those needs. And so we really see all of this disruption as an opportunity for us to be able to explore those avenues. And I think additionally, companies continue to look to Oklahoma City as a place for abundant talent to support these kinds of operations for their companies. So call centers, help centers, those kinds of things, back office operations have really, we continue to see a steady, if not an uptick, interest in Oklahoma City. And so we're really pleased about that. Next slide, please. And so lastly, just our scope of work for this year will continue really to be around that high touch, high volume engagement with our regional employers, building those relationships, understanding what's happening behind the walls, and really being able to have real-time understanding of the decisions that they're making, the pain points that they're feeling, and then really connecting them with value. So being able to assist them with connecting with resources, doing a better job of communicating the vast number of workforce partners that exist with those that are helping people connect talent to open positions, and being able to be a connector and being able to do that successfully, we think adds value to those partners. And then lastly, I brought up connecting, but specifically continuing the work of connecting our educational providers, whether that's career tech or higher education, directly with those hiring partners that are looking, and being able to help increase those efficiencies and their relationships. So that's the scope of our work this year. We look forward to it. And if we can survive thus far, we feel like we can continue to move ahead. So that's my report. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Great report. Let's take some questions or comments from the trustees. Seeing none, appreciate your comments. And
thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to present.
You have your general manager reports for you to look at. That leads us to comments from staff. Any staff have any comments?
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, we do need a motion on receiving the Economic Development Foundation report.
We do. Okay. I was wondering about that, and I looked for the word and didn't see receiving. We need a motion to receive the Economic Development Foundation Business Retention and Expansion Report.
It's been moved by Pickens, seconded by Hooper.
Aye.
McAtee?
Votes aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you, Francis. And thank you all for being there. You have your general manager reports. You heard some great information by our presenters. Appreciate them and you taking your time to come in this rather hazardous day of falling limbs and falling ice to participate in what things future looks challenging, but looks doable for the future for Oklahoma City. God bless you. Thank you for coming. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.